Well, hello everyone. Nice to be with you all tonight. So tonight we're going to be looking at the story of Lazarus. Now, some of you might have heard this story before, but if you haven't, it's an amazing miracle that is very significant to the life of Jesus. And as you might know, there's 4 books in the Bible about the life of Jesus. We've got Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. But this story of Lazarus is only mentioned in the book of John. So we won't need to be flipping between the other 3 books tonight. Now, in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark and Luke, there's lots of names thrown around about who is Jesus. Is he the carpenter's son? Jesus, the son of Joseph, a descendant of David? Is he the prophet Elijah? A great teacher? Is he the Son of God? These questions get thrown around in the other Gospels, but not so with the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John's main focus is on Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And we read about this in John 20, verses 30 and 31. And Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. So this is a really good summary of why we are spending a whole year looking at the life of Jesus, to really get to know him. And John also says in John 17 verse 3, and this is life eternal, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. Now I have to say, I've really been enjoying our Tuesday nights, and I'm finding the more I get to know Jesus, the more in awe I am of him and his love for mankind. Time and time again we see the compassion and love Jesus has for the people around him in his miracles and his teachings. And tonight, looking at the story of Lazarus, it's no different. Now, as I mentioned, the story of Lazarus is only found in the book of John. Now, John records 8 miracles or signs of Jesus. The other 3 Gospels show many more miracles, but John chooses to focus on these only 8. So we've got water turned into wine, the nobleman's son healed, healing at the pool of Bethesda, feeding of 5,000, Jesus walking on the water, the blind man sent to the pool of Siloam, the raising of Lazarus, which we're going to look at tonight, and the haul of fishes after Jesus' resurrection. Now, we've looked at a few of these in our past Tuesday nights, but yeah, tonight we'll be focusing on the raising of Lazarus. So, this is the last miracle that John records before Jesus' death. And his death is only roughly 2 weeks. So yeah, only roughly 2 weeks before Jesus himself is put to death and then resurrected. Now, the raising of Lazarus is a fair big chapter. It's like 47 verses, so we're not going to read it all at once. We're going to read sort of in chunks. But the other thing I just want to say before we get into it is sometimes I read these miracles of Jesus and I don't get as excited as I should. It can so easily be, you just read it and it's just black words on white paper, but these are incredible things, miraculous even. And tonight I want you to really try and think about someone being raised from the dead. I've been reading this chapter over and over, and it only really hit me the other night, wow, someone raised from the dead. And what's even more exciting, as we're going to see tonight, that this is the hope of every believer of Jesus, but not raised to die again, but raised to live forever. So let's start. We'll read John 11 verses 1 to 6. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. So the story starts off with Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, sending word to Jesus that, "Behold, he whom you love is sick." And we learn in the next few verses that he died not long after the messenger left to tell Jesus, so he was really sick. So interestingly, John records in verse 2 that it was his sister Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. But this hasn't happened yet. This anointing happens after the story. But we've got to remember that John is writing this book after all the events in it have happened. And I think John is showing us Mary's great faith and how that when she did that act of service, she was one of the few who knew that Jesus had to die. For in John 12 verse 7 we read, "Let her alone, she has kept this for the day of my burial." And perhaps by witnessing the raising of Lazarus and Jesus' words that day was part of this process. Now his sister's message for Jesus was, "Behold, he whom you love is sick." They're not asking anything of Jesus, but there would have been an expectation that with this news, Jesus would have come to see them, or maybe even just say the words, like he had done before in John 4 verse 47 to 53, with the nobleman's son, and he could have healed him then and there. But this isn't what happens. In verse 4, Jesus says to the messenger, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby." Now at this stage, Lazarus has most likely already died. So by the time this messenger gets back to Mary and Martha, Lazarus will be dead. And then this messenger is going to give Mary and Martha the message from Jesus that this sickness is not unto death. So I think they had a couple of challenging days while they pondered what Jesus had said. And then in verse 6 we read, "When Jesus had heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was." He didn't leave straight away and go see his friends. Now on the surface, this almost seems a bit callous. But John in verse 5 mentions, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus." And it's like he's put this in there just in case we were left wondering maybe he wasn't really that close to Lazarus after all, and he didn't really care about them. But it's because of his love for them that he stayed the 2 days. And I think there's some lessons in here for us. Firstly, bad things don't happen to good people, do they? This whole household was followers of Jesus. The promise of God was never that we would be immune from sickness and sadness and difficulties in this life. The promise is that come what may, he will never leave us or forsake us. And he has our eternal well-being at heart, not just the here and now. And in this story tonight, we're going to see that the death of Lazarus was permitted because it allowed an opportunity in verse 42 for the people which stand by, that they may believe that God had sent Jesus. So Mary and Martha didn't actually ask Jesus for anything. They just told him the situation. Lazarus is sick. And often in my prayers, I don't know what to ask for either. Sometimes all we can do is give our problems to God and trust that he's got this. Sometimes we can be praying to God and it seems like God hasn't heard our prayers or isn't concerned about us. It might seem like God has forgotten about us and doesn't understand what we're going through. But here we see that Jesus not coming straight away was to build their faith. It's really hard, but we have to remember that God's timing is not ours. He is our creator, he made us, and he knows exactly what we need. So we'll just continue reading John 11 verses 7 to 10. Then after this he said to his disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him." So after 2 days had passed, Jesus says to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea again." Now the last time they were in Judea, in chapter 8 verse 59 we read, "Then they took up stones to throw at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. So it's no surprise the disciples answer Jesus in verse 8, "Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you want to go back there?" And then in verse 9 we have this strange answer from Jesus. "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." To help explain this, we'll just look at John 8 verse 12, where Jesus says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." So Jesus is described as the light of the world. And in verse 9, if we walk in the light, or follow our Lord Jesus, who is the light, we remain in him and our lives are secure in him. But to not walk in the day is to not follow Jesus, which means we will stumble because we have no direction. We don't know where we're going. But Jesus here is reassuring his disciples not to worry because they are following him and he is the light. Jesus knew that he must go to Bethany and that he would be safe because the hour of night had not yet arrived. Or in other words, he knew it was not yet time to give his own life. Well, that's my explanation, but if you've got any tips on that, you can come and see me after. So then, continuing on, John 11, verses 11 to 16. "These things he said, and after that he had said to them, 'Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up.' Then his disciples said, 'Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well.' However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, 'Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him.' Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.'" So we see the disciples are a little confused here. First, Jesus says that our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go to wake him. The disciples are thinking, "Oh, that's okay then." And then Jesus says, "Lazarus is dead." And in verse 15, we're given one of the reasons why he waited. We read, "And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe." So Lazarus is dead, but Jesus uses the term sleeping. Why sleeping? Because as a follower of Jesus, when we make the decision to follow him and be baptized, we become part of God's family and have the promise of the resurrection, being raised from the grave when Jesus comes back to the earth. So it's like a sleep because it's not forever. And 1 Thessalonians puts it nicely. It reads, "But I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus." And this is such comforting verses. Here it's saying, if we believe Jesus died and rose again for us, then we don't need to fear death of ourselves or the people that we love, because it's just like a sleep, and just as Jesus was raised from the dead, so will we be too. Pretty awesome. So continuing on, John 11, 17 to 20. "So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went out and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house." So when Jesus arrives, we read that Lazarus has been dead for 4 days already. Now, when a Jewish person died, the body is prepared for burial and then buried not long after, usually within 24 hours. And after, the family would sit in their house and mourn and receive condolences from neighbours and friends for a week. This was a Jewish custom called Shiva, and this is what both Mary and Martha were doing when Jesus gets to Bethany. So when Jesus arrives, Martha comes out to meet him, but Mary stays in the house. And when we come to John 11, verses 25 to 26, Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever believes in me, just going to check something. All good. So I'll say that again. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whosoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? This is an amazing statement, and it's one of the 7 times Jesus makes the statement, I am. And it's an I am such and such. So the list that John records is, I am the bread of life. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. And in other words, Jesus has all the answers we need, and he is all we need. He's shown us the way, and if we remain in him, we have nothing to fear, not even death itself. The phrase, I am the resurrection and the life, he who believes in me shall never die, is definitely my favourite. We are surrounded by death. Everyone we know will eventually die, and death happens to us all. But as a follower of Jesus, with death, the thing we most fear gone, we can go on in confidence, knowing death is but a sleep and our lives are safe with him. And verse 27 takes us back to the purpose of this book. She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is come into the world. So we'll just continue on 28 to 37. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary her sister, saying, The teacher has come and is calling for you. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, She is going to the tomb to weep there. Then, when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, See how he loved him. And some of them said, Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? So when Mary comes to Jesus, she falls at his feet and she says the same words as Martha. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. It's like they both feel a bit let down. Like, why did you let this happen, Jesus? And I guess in our lives, we might also ask God this same question when sad or difficult situations arise. And Jesus never rebukes them for their honesty. Both these sisters didn't have the foresight to know why Jesus had not come straight away or healed him then and there. And neither do we. But like both Mary and Martha, we can choose to go on believing and not lose our faith even when things seem impossible. And in verse 33 we read, Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews that came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? And they say, Come and see. And in verse 35 we come to the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. And this tells us so much about both Jesus and our Father in heaven. Jesus had come to Bethany for the purpose of raising Lazarus from the dead. he knew very soon weeping would turn to joy. And so you would think Jesus would be happy and joyful, knowing what's just about to happen. But we just read he was greatly troubled and wept. He had such a deep compassion for those who were suffering. Yes, Jesus could have come earlier or even just said the words and healed Lazarus. But from what we read earlier, this delay was to the glory of his Father. Here we see that Jesus takes no pleasure in our sorrows. And just as we read in Hebrews 4 verse 15 about how he sympathizes with our weaknesses. I think Jesus also weeps here over the sad state man is in. Death and suffering comes to all, and he knows it's going to keep happening until he's returned back to the earth and the setup of the kingdom. And in verse 37, here again we have John recording the reactions of the people who were there at the time. So verse 38, Jesus comes to the tomb and asks them to take away the stone. I'll just read 38 to 44. Then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, "Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me." Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Loose him and let him go." So Martha says to the Lord, "By this time there is a stench," or in other words, his body is decomposing. Are you sure this is a good idea? An ever-practical Martha is stating the facts and unaware of the bigger spiritual lesson that's just about to happen. Now, after hearing her confession to Jesus a few verses earlier, this statement seems almost strange. We all doubt at times in our lives, and I think Jesus' response in verse 40, when he said, "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" is comforting. It's like, "Trust me, Martha," and that's what we're called to do as well. So verse 41, the stones rolled back, and Jesus prays to his Father out loud and says, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." And this is interesting because Jesus must have already prayed to his Father and asked him to raise him. And here again we see the reason for the miracle in verse 42. "And I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me." So in verse 43, Jesus cries with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And maybe picture yourself standing here witnessing this. You're witnessing this bloke who has died, come out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. Jesus says to him, "Loose him and let him go." Imagine being one of the people unwrapping the grave clothes of someone you'd just buried days before. And then we read, "Then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things Jesus did. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, 'What shall we do? For this man works many signs. If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation.' And one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest that year, said to them, 'You know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not the whole nation should perish.' Now this he did not say in his own authority, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. Then from that day on, they plotted to put him to death. Therefore, Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there into the country near the wilderness, to a city called Ephraim, and there remained with his disciples. And the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went from the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover, to purify themselves. Then they sought Jesus and spoke among themselves as they stood in the temple, "What do you think, that he will not come to the feast?" Now both the chief priests and Pharisees had given a command that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it, that they might seize him. So we've just witnessed an incredible miracle, and it showed that he had the power of God and that he was the Son of God. And we read, then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the thing that Jesus did believed in him. But we read in verse 46, some went away to the Pharisees and told them the thing Jesus did. So after this amazing miracle, we have two groups of people. We have those that believed that this was the Son of God, and we have those who went and told the Pharisees. And if we go back and look at all the other signs in John and notice the different reactions of the people, then we can ask ourselves, which reaction do I have to these things? Am I changed? Do I believe in the Son of God after I've heard, or do I choose to turn away? After this miracle of raising Lazarus, we read in verse 47, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to work out what to do. For this man works many signs. If we do nothing, everyone will believe on him, and the Romans will come and take away our place and our nation. And then we read in verse 50, Caiaphas saying, it's better that one man dies for the people than that the whole nation perishes. And I think it's really interesting because that's exactly what Jesus is going to do of his own free will. He's going to willingly give his life for the world. And we read verse 53, how that from that day on, they plotted to put him to death. All their scheming and plotting was bringing about the purpose of God unknowingly. It's almost unbelievable. People just saw a man raised from the dead, all these witnesses, and yet they want to kill him because they're going to lose their place in society. The blindness of the Pharisees is a very real problem that we too can be guilty of. Are our lives so comfortable now that we won't humble ourselves before the Creator and change our ways to follow Jesus? It's always important to remember that these things were put on record, not to be a warning to these men. They're all dead and buried. They are here to help us to believe, to really believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that we can have life through his saving name. So in summary, we have Jesus does all things for the glory of God. God's timing is not our timing. Sometimes when we think our prayers are going unanswered, God is very much at work. He does all things that we might increase our faith, even when it isn't pleasant at the time. He encourages us and has compassion for us in our weak mortal state. We don't need to fear death, for it's just a sleep for a follower of Jesus. Remember, he is the resurrection and the life. And I guess the challenge for us is, do we believe Jesus is the Son of God? And if so, what next? In a way, we're all sick like Lazarus. We're all eventually going to die. But if we believe that Jesus is the Son of God and commit our lives to following him through the act of baptism, then death is not final but a sleep.